Who am I talking to? All of you.
Right there.
Okay.
Start with your name and title.
Tom Bosworth. I am the owner of Bosworth Law, and I represent the estate of Melinda Hoagland.
So just explain the gist of your lawsuit.
These cases were brought to bring about accountability for the death of Melinda Hoagland at age 12 due to the egregious failures of numerous governmental agencies, the counties, and institutions that knew that Melinda was being abused and turned a blind eye essentially over and over again and never intervened.
Explain to us how they turned a blind eye and who did it.
The county of Chester was repeatedly notified by educators that Melinda was being physically abused. Black eyes, injuries, suspected physical abuse was reported in black and white. Not one time did county officials go visit the home. Not one time did they interview Melinda. Not one time did they speak with this child. And that's in addition to the fact that they knew she was living with a convicted child abuser in Cindy Warren. This wasn't an oopsie daisy, we dropped the ball, we should have seen it. This was, they knew it and they disregarded it.
Tom, don't say that they called child line. We hear this a lot when we cover these cases, that, well, we call child line, but we don't know what happens once that call is made to child line. Is that an effective system to protect the children of this state?
Certainly calling child lines, I would say the bare minimum of what you need to do as an educator. It's good enough to call them, but if you see the same things happening over and over again and you have a student in your class who's becoming emaciated, losing weight, has scabs, wounds, bruises, hiding food in her locker was something they knew about, you have to do more. You can't just pick up the phone, place the call, and phone it in, no pun intended. You have to do more, and these teachers, although they did call the authorities, there were dozens of times that they didn't as well. So I think that they definitely failed.
Why Monroe County? Why are you suing Monroe County?
Monroe County knew from the jump that Cindy Warren was convicted of endangering a child, was sentenced up to 7 years in prison, a felony crime, and they knew that she was involved in Melinda's life, and they knew that there was a public docket where it said that Cindy Warren can't really be around this child, and they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing, and they allowed her to remain in a home with a literal convicted child abuser.
Tom, you have this law when a child dies. How many other children do you think at this point, because of this kind of behavior, are in danger?
If CYS and the county's behavior and response to Melinda Hoagland is any indication of the way that their systems operate, I'm sincerely concerned, not just as a lawyer, but as a father, in all sincerity, for the fact that this is how these agencies operate. Again, this was a blatant red flag staring them in the face for years, and to say they failed would be an understatement.
You're
Tom, do we
representing
need
the
a
older
whole new,
sisters.
do we need a completely new system? Do we need legislative change? What else beyond this lawsuit needs to happen?
We need enforcement. We need some governmental agency or the governor or somebody to step in and say, this is unacceptable. You know, I used to play baseball, and if you did badly in the game, you got it. You heard from your coach. You heard about it. You can't just let things like this happen and do nothing about it. They need to be criminally charged, in my opinion, the folks who were responsible, not just Rendell Hoagland and Cindy Warren, but the other folks who were responsible here need to be criminally charged. I haven't seen that yet, but I think that's appropriate here.
Tom, you're representing the older sisters. Were they aware of the abuse, and who did they voice that to?
They were not aware of the abuse. They tried to be a part of Melinda's life as much as they could, but they were stonewalled and blocked and essentially like walled off from Melinda. And all the while, Rendell and Cindy moved away from where these young ladies live and essentially isolated Melinda.
Did they live in Monroe County, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Didn't the sisters, though, have concerns about the dad, though? Didn't they?
The sisters learned about Cindy Warren just like any Joe Schmo can if you Google it, and you see that she has this background, and they voiced those concerns to their father, and they were met with defensiveness, and he basically shut them off and said, well, people change, and this is who I'm with. And that was kind of the start of them being isolated and excommunicated from the family.
Did they not see the child? Did they never see the little girl at all?
They saw her sparingly in the 6 months before she died, maybe once or twice. All of them, several of the sisters made a decision to essentially end their relationship with their father based on his insistence on staying with Cindy Warren and being in that relationship. And as for the others, they were pushed away by Rendell himself.
What they didn't, in seeing her 6 months prior to her death, she dies at 50 pounds. The sisters didn't notice?
They saw her in passing while she was in bed, still waking up with a sweatshirt on, kind of in and out of the house, said hey, and then left, and that was it. So they didn't really have an opportunity to take in the full extent of it. And we know certainly that the damage and physical deterioration of Melinda progressed significantly in those last 6 months.
Did Chester County children and youth do anything?
Believe it or not, they picked up the phone and called Rendell Hoagland, but they didn't get through to him. So what happens next is Rendell Hoagland forwards their phone number to none other than Cindy Warren, the documented felon child abuser, who then picks up the phone, this is Cindy Warren, and calls Chester County Children and Youth. And the fact that there was a conversation that existed between Cindy Warren and a caseworker for children and youth is mind-boggling to me. They're actually on the phone with this person who's got this documented background where there's already a custody agreement that says she can't be living with Melinda, and they're asking this person about a child abuse report, and she says essentially, hey, no big deal, everything's fine here. Nothing, no follow-up.
Talk about that custody agreement. I mean, that custody agreement was in Monroe County. Talk about how that's pretty central to your case, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a custody agreement that was put on the docket for everyone to see publicly, and it limited how much Cindy Warren could be around this child. But because it's not 1815 anymore, and we have the internet, anybody in any county agency or any governmental agency had access to that order. And certainly when CYS gets word of something, regardless of what county they're in, the first thing that they need to do is figure out if there's any prior proceedings, reports, or custody litigation with this child. That's like, basic stuff. So, Chester County either did that and saw the Monroe County custody agreement and disregarded it, or they didn't bother to look at all.
So what were the limits on that custody agreement? What exactly was she, you see limits of Cindy Warren to have interaction with Melinda. What were the limits?
The limits were that Cindy could only be around Melinda it was approximately, I think, 4 hours a day, and that each year that passed by, and this agreement was entered in 2020, she would get an additional 1 hour. It's sort of like probation for, I guess, a step parent, but obviously she was living full-time with Melinda, which Chester County learned, and there are 24 hours in a day, not 4 or 5.
Why you're suing the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? Why?
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is the umbrella, so to speak, of this whole Childline process. They oversee Childline, they manage it, they enforce Childline. So they're the first line of defense, so to speak, when a call comes in, and then they shoot that call out to whatever county, agency needs to handle it. But arguably, Pennsylvania had access to all of the information throughout all the counties, more than any other individual county did, because they're overseeing all of it.
Is there any evidence that those calls to Childline made it anywhere other than that answering machine?
They made it to Chester County Children and Youth. They got forwarded how they should have been to the counties, but what the counties did at that point was fumble it. I think fumble's generous. They like I said, they called Rendell Hoagland, they spoke to him on the phone, they spoke to Cindy Warren on the phone, but never corroborated any of their stories about Melinda's injuries, never went to the home, never sought to interview Melinda, and that's like their basic function.
Why a federal claim? Why a federal claim? And let's say you get a multi-million-dollar settlement, a wrongful death, who benefits?
So the estate would benefit and the sisters would benefit. Ordinarily, in a case where a child dies, the money, so to speak, would go to the surviving parents. But we have something called the Slayers Act in Pennsylvania, which prevents somebody from recovering money in a lawsuit when they played a role in the person's death. So we will certainly seek to enforce that here, because obviously Rendell Hoagland cannot and should not financially benefit from a killing that he played a part in.
There was another child in the house, right?
Yes, this was, Cindy Warren's little boy. Yeah.
He wasn't abused? He was not?
Initially, law enforcement believed he was not, but subsequent further investigation revealed that he was. I don't think to the degree that Melinda was, but he's since been removed from that home.
So in addition to money, what about change? Will the outcome of your lawsuit be made public? Will you agree to an NDA or any kind of silence here, or will you allow the public to see what you've uncovered in this suit?
We'll never agree to confidentiality under any circumstance. You couldn't hold a gun to my head in this case and make me agree to any NDA. In my opinion, the counties and defendants should come forward now and do the right thing and admit responsibility for what they did and didn't do, and compensate this family and do what they need to do. In my experience, that won't happen, but that's the right thing. So regardless of the financial outcome, we will get change, we will get accountability, and there's not an amount of money that these girls would take or have in exchange for having their little sister back. So this is not about money, but we live in America, and in this country, unfortunately, with corporations and agencies, a lot of times the only thing to get them moving or get them to change is money.
We see that, however, today is the birthday of another little girl who was raped and murdered at the hands of her adoptive mother and her boyfriend, Grace Packer. And there were millions of dollars exchanged there. And this case is now about a decade old, and still here we are today with another dead child.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately they didn't listen, they didn't look hard enough, and they certainly didn't implement the changes that needed to be implemented. I don't know what non-economic terms, if any, were a part of that settlement, but certainly they should have changed things, they should have done better, and they obviously didn't do that.
So you'll settle this case, you won't seal it. I mean, you'd be willing to settle the case, you're not going to seal the case. You've committed now that you will not seal
The case will never, if there's a settlement, that's going to be up to the defendants. We're ready, willing, and able to go into a courtroom and put 12 people in a jury box and see exactly what they would say about what they think the proper amount is here to compensate this little girl for being starved, abused, and completely humiliated, shackled to furniture, naked, with metal things that should only really be in prisons. So if the defendants want to own up to what they did, we'll settle the case, never under any confidentiality. But if they're going to jerk around as civil defendants and insurance companies, which, by the way, don't forget that there are insurance companies behind all this, then we'll go to trial.
When she was in school, can you explain to me, like, how they were negligent? I mean, was this just a case where they saw her emaciated and just said, we'll call children and families and forget about it?
It's worse than that. They saw bruising on her eyes. They saw what was described as a rug burn going across her entire face. They saw extreme weight loss. They saw other wounds. But on top of that, she was habitually truant, which really means in Pennsylvania she was missing a crazy amount of school. There were letters being sent out to Rendell Hoagland and Cindy Warren about her truancy, but the normal truancy procedures that exist that need to be put in place, notifying a magisterial district judge, taking action to talk to the child, do counseling, none of it was done. So it's not a situation where you just had blatant signs of physical abuse, which would be good enough to sound the alarm, but on top of that, you have a child who's got a bunch of unexcused absences. You've got the school reaching out saying, we've got no medical documentation that she was sick or that she's hurting the way that you said. Can you send a doctor's note? Nothing. They would never confirm, never corroborate it, and yet the school just went along their way doing nothing further to confirm she was okay.
Is this all, you're saying this is all the schools that you named in the suit did this?
Yes, she was first at Upper Dublin School District, and that was like the least amount of exposure in terms of a school. But then at Coatesville, there was just a myriad of issues that they observed firsthand that went unchecked and unreported. And then finally, we know that she spent the last 5 months of her life at the Commonwealth Charter Academy School, which is, by the way, a private corporation. As much as they want to make the public think otherwise, they are a private company with millions and millions of dollars. They're the largest private charter cyber school in Pennsylvania, and these are folks who are messaging Melinda, are you okay? 2 days before she died, it's reported that she was on a Zoom. She couldn't even see. She was so lethargic, and we know now that she was in organ failure at that time and losing her vision. And she had a black eye, and the only thing visible to her teacher at that point was her eyes up. And this is 2 days before she dies. And ask me what a Commonwealth Charter did about that. Nothing. Nothing. And if that were the only thing that happened here, the case would be strong, but it's one of 25, 30 other failures.
A systematic failure.
A repeated, continuous debacle, I would say.
Commonwealth Charter of for-profit?
They're a private corporation, for profit, yes.
You guys want Alex to jump in?
Yeah.
Living the dream.
Spell your name, please.
Sure. Alexandria Crothhamel, Alexandria, Crothhamel, Crouthhamel.
Can you tell us what the sisters of Melinda Hoagland want out of all of this?
Sure. I've been the primary contact for Melinda's sisters, as Tom has been dealing with the federal lawsuits and the state lawsuits, so they contact me quite often. What they want out of this is change. They are not looking for monetary damages. They could care less if it's $1 or $1 billion. What they're looking for is change. As you know, this is starting to become very popular. It's starting to be in the media regarding child abuse cases. What they want is a registry, similar to Megan's Law. They want a registry for physical offenders. As you know, Cindy Warren was already convicted child abuser. She was placed in a home with a child, which should have never happened. Again, a systematic failure that Tom discussed. So because of that, they want a registry that not just jobs and law enforcement can see, but the general public. Why should physical abuse be any different than sexual?
So you also represent the stepsisters in this case, you're sharing representation?
That's correct. Tom and I are co-counsel on these cases. He has filed them under his name, but I am heavily involved as well. You will see me in the courtroom and dealing with the sisters as well.
So primarily focused on change, but obviously this is a multi-million-dollar wrongful death claim and what appears to be obvious mistakes. Obviously, what do they do with that money? You're likely to win a very large settlement here. What's their plan?
So their plan is to create a foundation to present awareness. So they want the Melinda's Law passed, which is the registry, but they also want to create a foundation for resources and for advocacy for clients. We have children, not clients. We have children and youth services and things of that nature that are funded by the government and installed by the government. But what they want to do is create a private foundation that will help children in need. So if they're in an abuse situation, where do they go? Who provides their clothes? Who's going to care for them? They don't want any child placed in a situation where there is already a convicted child abuser or somebody on the registry.
Have they had any contact with their father at all since all this?
They have not had any contact with their father.
Were they abused ever?
Not to my knowledge.
What's their mindset about it? I mean, Tom said that there was 6 months prior, they got a glimpse of it. They got a glimpse of it. Passing glimpse. Didn't get a great look at her, but they saw her.
That's correct.
So they know what she went through. They know how she died. What's their mindset about this cause?
So because of their strained relationship with their father and Cindy and their own lack of abuse, they did not think that this was feasible. They did not think that this was possible. They barely saw her. One of the girls hasn't had contact with their father in over 2 years. So they didn't, or see Melinda in over 2 years. So they had no idea that this was occurring. One of the girls has been in repetitive contact with father trying to see Melinda because they wanted to spend time with her, but that was constantly shut down by father with excuses.
Where was Melinda's biological mom in all of this? And why didn't she see any abuse? What happened there? She had her own problems and that was custody raising? Talk about that?
Yes, there is a custody order which was currently in effect where she was able to see the child on the weekends. She did not exercise that custody due to her own physical disabilities.
So the prosecutors say that this is obviously a murder one charge. They said they'd like the death penalty. Is that what the stepsisters would like? Would they like the death penalty administered against this man?
I can't say for sure that they would like the death penalty administered, but they certainly want accountability and they certainly don't want to see him walk free.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
You're
Ashley.
welcome.